call this meeting together of the Board of Directors at 5:10. Sorry for being a little bit late. Our closed session took a little bit longer than expected. We had to bandage up the general manager before we could open it up to the public. So, if Director Ellifard, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Director Ellifard?
Here.
Director Evans? Here. Director Martin?
Present.
Director Spinella?
Here.
Thank you. And Director Van Holding.
Our illustrious president is missing. He's on vacation, and we'll see him on the news, I'm sure, for a European vacation that he's on. So we will miss him while he's gone. Like to adopt the agenda for the regular board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous, aye. Okay, public comment. Any member of the public who wishes to speak? And I do have one from Michael Hunsacker.
Director Martin, we do have a presentation first.
Oh. Okay, hold on, Michael, take your time. We're gonna do a presentation first.
Do you want me to take it? Okay, so I'll do it. So as the board knows, Vallecitos is a member of the Aqua JPIA, and we receive our insurance programs and services through them. And Aqua JPIA has a safety program. It's called the HR LaBounty Safety Award Program, and I'll read you a real brief description from their website. The Safety Award Program is designed for all JPIA members as a way for them to promote safe workplace behavior and operations practices and reward those employees who demonstrate safe behavior, take part in recognizable proactive activities, or participate in risk-reducing actions. It gives member agencies another way to foster a safety culture that reduces the potential for losses. So this year, 3 of our employees received this award, so it's a pretty good accomplishment. And under this program, so there's a financial award and a plaque that will be bestowed upon them. They did something that put together a safer work environment. So one of the things our sewer collections and treatment crews do is that they have to clean the solids wet well down at the Meadowlark Reclamation Facility. So the process involved in that is you have to open the hatch, and then you have to stand near the opening and do various activities to clean it, high-pressure hoses and mechanical equipment to get rid of the crud that forms there. So you have to use hand tools to clean the wet well, and it's a very potential safety hazard. It's a fall hazard is what they call it. So normally you would have protective devices that you anchor yourself to, and they're mounted permanently on the ground, and you connect your safety harness or that to them. But those devices themselves can become a trip hazard. So you may be going to connect yourself to prevent the fall, and you may trip on this device. So 3 of our employees, Jeremy Scott, Dennis Richardson, and Matt Weiss, came up with a way to get around that. So they developed a system to take those permanent anchor systems and make them removable, so that when you're not opening the hatch to access it, those above ground devices aren't there, eliminating the trip hazard. So something was submitted on their behalf for that safety award, and it was recognized by Aqua JPIA as receiving the HR LaBounty Safety Award. So 2 of them are with us tonight. We have Jeremy Scott and Dennis Richardson. Matt couldn't make it. He had to attend to a family emergency, but they're here tonight, and I'd like them to come up front to receive their awards from the board. So if I can ask the board to come down and take photos with them and hand out the awards, that would be great. And while you're coming down, let's hear it for our employees for making a safe workplace.
I thought you were going to say Matt tripped.
No. Thank goodness, no.
JPIA, you are listed in their book, and your names are there, and it put a smile to all of our faces when we saw you guys listed there. It's not the first time. You've been up before, you've got other ideas, and JPIA, recommends you keep doing this as often as you can, because it really does help. They really do appreciate all that you do what you do. So, I know you've done it before, so it's great. Thank you.
So while the board's coming back up, I may remind the board that back several months ago, we received a refund check from Aqua JPIA for over $140,000. And the reason for that is for low claims that were submitted, and ideas like this are a big reason for why we don't have high claims history here.
Okay. Again, public wishing to speak, Michael Hunsaker. Are you ready now? Floor is yours, Michael, for 3 minutes.
No problem. Mike Hunsaker, 115 Equestrian Court, President of the Twin Oaks Valley Property Owners Association. I would imagine the general manager will be mentioning and indicating the differences and new challenges of AB 1668. I'm just now plowing through the bill myself, all 30 pages of it. And I think that there's going to be some obvious problems that we must face in San Diego again. And his insights would be appreciated. Also note that the indoor residential limit is supposed to be targeted at 55 gallons per day. And the biggest challenge is going to be apartments, because they are largely on master meters. And there's no individual accountability. SB 7X requires sometime this year for the elimination of master meters in new construction. And I'd appreciate knowing when that is going to come about. The average consumption of water is about 180 gallons per day for an apartment. And there's 2.2 residents per apartment. And so that comes out to a little less than 90 gallons per day. We're far away from the 55 gallon per day limit. So when are we going to start avoiding the waste and excessive use of apartments? And each dweller needs the individual input as to what he's consuming. Otherwise, there's no way he can save. And having lived in apartments myself, I know one of the biggest things that is a problem are leaks out of faucets and toilets. And landlords are notoriously slow in fixing them. And master meters are notoriously insensitive. The new digital meters we have are about 30, 35 times more sensitive to leaks than a master meter. So are we going to start addressing what is really the biggest challenge? Because the indoor use of single-family dwellings is probably using about 180 gallons per day as well, but there's about 3.2 average residents per single-family dwelling. So we need to address the biggest problems first.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else wishing to be heard? No? Okay, the notice to the public, which is listed, but I'm going to read it. All matters listed on the consent calendar will be voted upon by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or member of the public requests that a particular item be removed from the consent calendar, in which case it will be considered separately under action items. So we're actually going to do that. There's one item that's being requested to be approved by a member of the public, and that's 1.3. Anyone else want to approve anything on the consent calendar?
Move for approval minus 1.3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, ayes have it. Mr. Hunsaker, you wish to approve number 1.3.
Mike Hunsaker again. I appreciate the listing of the number of units on this development and the amount of facility fees that are paid. It looks a little strange, though, because water facility fees are much higher than waste treatment fees. And here we have a development which is paying far less for water than it is for waste treatment. And the waste treatment is supposed to be based on the gallons of water consumed. So this doesn't really make sense. Now, my understanding is also that this is about a little over 2 acres of land, and there's 200 units on it. Is it really 100 units per acre? Thank you.
Do we have some answers for that?
Yeah, I think there's some mistakes.
Yeah, I'll ask James Gumpel to come up and address that.
Thank you, General Manager Prum. Members of the board, so this item is actually divided into 3 separate board items, 1.3, 1.4, and 1.5. In total, there's about 4 acres, 4.1 or 4.3 acres of the site. They're going to have a little bit over 200 units. Mr. Hunsaker is correct on that. So it's not 100 units per acre. The cap fees for the sewer are actually considerably higher than the water, as shown in 1.4 and 1.5. It was separated that way for the developer's phase in the project. The developer chose the separation, and we moved forward. So they submitted plans in 3 separate phases, so this way they could complete the phasing of the projects. I don't know, and for reasons I'm sure that they have, whether it's cash flow or just construction flow. But the 1.4 and 1.5 list the cap fees for water and sewer associated with the number of developments, with the majority of it being in item 1.4. It's off memory, it's about a little under 1.1 million for water for majority of the units, roughly 130 or 140 units. I think that number's a little off. And then a little bit over $1.2 million for sewer just in that item. The remaining units, which is 56 units, which is their what they call the phase 2, again, the sewer cap fees are higher in that than water. So the whole project on the NU4 site, as it's called, is actually all 3, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, and that paints the entire picture, which also addresses Mr. Hunsaker's questions on the number of units per acre, the fact that the cap fees for the sewer is going to be higher than water. And again, the reason it's shown this way is the way the developer separated out, and 1.3 only really addresses the main line that's going to be for slope irrigation.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, that was it. Well done.
I think that answered all the questions. Okay, looking for a motion on 1.3?
Move to approve item 1.3.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, aye. Thank you. Moving right along to action item, Nellie Bell, of 2.1, disposition of district vehicle number 9. That was low potion number 9.
Maybe. Good evening, Vice President Martin and board members. I'm here to talk to you about district vehicle number 9. The interesting thing for me was anecdotally, I'd heard that it was the first vehicle that the district had or purchased, and yet it's listed as number 9. Did a little research, and it turns out that we had some pieces of equipment that were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but they weren't a vehicle. It was pieces of equipment. So it's a 1946 Willys Jeep that we've had since the district came into being. Back in February, I met with the Public Awareness Personnel Policy Committee with Director Betty Evans and President Jim Hernandez, and they asked me about using it to go out to community events. And this is sort of the research of that request. So the Jeep's currently in kind of a mothball status. It's underneath a tarp. It's in the mechanics bay. The last time it was used for an official purpose was at a parade several years back, and I guess one of the board members was driving it in a parade, and it died while being driven and overheated essentially. It doesn't really like to be driven at about 2 miles an hour. It wants to get some airflow through its cooling system. Prior to being worked as a parade vehicle, it was used back to work on this hillside back behind us. And there's kind of a scary story of staff members losing brake pressure as they were coming down the hill in the Jeep. I spoke further with maintenance staff about its status. They point out that it was last refurbished back in 2007, and it seems like that wasn't that long ago, but it was 11 years ago. And so some of the changes and repairs that have been made subsequently may need to be made again to keep it in a drivable status. Previously, before it was in this refurbishment where now it's white with the Vallecitos logo, it was more of a tan color, it had the San Marcos County Water District logo on it. Some of the issues with the Jeep currently that I can share with you is it doesn't have seat belts, so not really street safe. It leaks oil, cooling system overheats at slow speeds. Clutch is pretty temperamental, the choke is unreliable. The mechanics think the tires have actually rotted inside, that the tubes inside have rotted. They're not 100% sure. Separate from these known issues, they have concerns about the vehicle's drivetrain, whether it's up to snuff. I guess it popped out of gear from time to time. And they think, just based off the top of the head guess, that it probably could use about $10,000 worth of work to get it to a drivable status. So given the money that it would cost to address the maintenance and the safety issues and the fact that it's really not being used, we're looking for board's direction on what to do with the vehicle. I've outlined 5 different options. It could just stay where it's at. We could sell the Jeep as surplus property. We could donate the Jeep to a nonprofit. We could budget funds to update it, maintain it, and get it in a drivable condition. Or we could move it into the lobby and have it serve as a historical piece. And it's recommended that it be moved into the lobby as a historical piece. It really is got too much value to donate, probably too much sentimental value to try and sell. I did do some research on what the value of it would be. I tried to do the Kelley Blue Book, but that only goes back to 1992. You can't look up a 1946 Willys Jeep on Kelley Blue Book. There are some other websites that I found that gave a range of values. It all depends on what kind of shape it is. Is it still mint condition? Is it original equipment? Those types of things. Looks like you could maybe, if you're lucky, if you get the right bidder, you could maybe get $9,000 for it. Checking out the size of the Jeep and the clearance through the front doors, there's about 2 inches to spare on either side to fit it through the front doors. Plan would be to bring it up on a Saturday, get it through the front doors, have the mechanics take the fluids out of it and the electrical equipment. They pointed out that I don't think it really has a key. There's just like a button and it'll just start. And you don't want a small child hopping in there and start the Jeep and driving away in it. So if we were to put it in the lobby, we'd obviously put out some signage materials and information on the district's World War II era, 1946 Willys Jeep, and make it like a museum piece, part of the history of all of us here. Board members, staff, the members of the public, we're all owners of the system, and it's all of our piece of history, and we're looking for direction.
Director Evans?
Well, I love that idea, and I wonder if the Historical Society would also like to help maybe even have a few revolving displays over time on ways that the Jeep was used in the parades and whatnot. That would be really exciting. And then I have these grandkids that if you could just like make that Jeep, like balance, they'd be more than happy to pay 50 cents a ride, and we could make it a fundraising event. But other than being a little cheap about that, I would love to see us be able to do that. So I'd like to know what would be involved cost-wise, and I'd
Director
hate to
Sinello.
lose that. I think it's really valuable.
Director Sinello.
Since you're asking for direction, I'm kind of inclined just to sell it, but I understand, I can appreciate kind of the sentimental value. And this came up in one of the committees, is that what I heard?
Yeah.
Okay, and just kind of looking out at the lobby, there's not a lot of room. If we, as a different option, was it considered to maybe put it, I noticed there's like the area where we have the artificial turf, there's like a little pad out there in the garden area that might be nice size for a Jeep to be on some sort of stand or something, versus being inside the lobby.
That's a reasonable idea, and I'm certain that could be done. My only thought is that one gets it out in the elements where it's gonna deteriorate over time. And there's a pine tree right there, and they usually have pretty acidic needles, and it would almost take, daily effort to keep that off of it.
I like that idea outside, but then we'd have to cover it then.
That would be my recommendation, yes. And that sort of takes away from the way the garden's set up.
I'm glad to weigh in. It's a 1946 Willys, and I've seen it in operation and saw it the day it broke down. I was in the parade with Betty, Margaret Ferguson, who was driving at the time. For it to be historic rather than hysteric piece of work, it would need to be original. Tan, would need to say San Marcos County Water Authority. Then it would some have history to it. It's been remade 11 years ago, repainted. It doesn't have a lot of equipment on it, if I remember correctly. And it's from memory, I haven't seen it where you have it hidden away. I just don't see us spending any money on it, to be honest with you. I think we have much more valuable use for it. If there's a place to put it outside and let the elements do what the elements do, I don't have a problem with it. But I think to spend money to bring it inside, it's not a historical vehicle, unless it was brought back to that condition, which would cost way too much money.
Well, and I think, I thought about that, and the Jeep was in a previous condition. It was in a certain condition when it was first purchased, and then it was in turn subsequently modified by the district over time. So it's been in various stages of paint color and logos on it. And so the initial condition that we got it in, I think it's unknown at this point. I know there was a point in time where it was tan and it did have it, but there was a point before that when it didn't. And that would be, quote, the original condition when the district purchased it.
Director Sinello.
I was just kind of rethinking the last couple minutes here, and Director Evans brought up a really good point with the San Marcos Historical Society. Could we maybe reach out to them and see if they have any interest? Because they have some areas where they have some older homes and some of their other little museum type stuff, and maybe we can donate it to them if they have an interest in putting it on display, and they could put up some signage. We maybe be able to provide it of what it looked like originally, but back when it was tan, and then what it looks like today. And that way, it kind of gets it off our hands, but it also keeps it into the public, and it's kind of still that becomes part of San Marcos history.
I did speak with Tanis about that when I was out there for hands-on history, and I'm fairly certain they would be willing to take it. I think the burden would be on us to provide the pad, the concrete pad to put it on, and the covering, so there'd be additional expenses involved with donating it.
Okay.
If we could, I would just like to suggest that we research what that cost would be to us. To either donate to them or to put it outside here and cover it, so we know what we're talking about financially before we say it's not worth it. We'll know for sure then if it is or it isn't. I think Hal's made a very interesting point about trying to get it back to its original. It'd be fun to see it painted as the first thing we have a recollection of it being painted. But that was my hope of the displays also, as you can show. This is where it was the last time it was done, and here are pictures of how it was before, if we want to save the expense of refurbishing it. I mean, that's how I see a display, to show how it changes, or maybe you have a,
Well, and Director Evans, I'm currently reaching out to other staff to try and find images of the Jeep in its previous condition. I haven't been successful at this point,
Well,
but
I'm
there
wondering-
might be some images of it that we could.
there might be
we could
some that
create.
are actually the Historical Society from the Christmas parades, because that's probably the most significant place people would have seen it. But if we also know what's involved, before we say no, if we could do that, just bring it back with a little bit more information, and we can make a decision at that time, see what we're talking about. But I like that idea because it ties in with our history of water. If they have space for it out there, and maybe it's something we can think about.
Chris, I know you're really tech savvy, but there was no Google back in 1946. You can't just go and image this thing.
You know, there's images of it. In fact, I might have one from the Haggerty valuation tool.
Hey,
And,
Chris,
that's what the original equipment of them,
Oh, yeah.
looked like back in the day.
yeah, it doesn't take an expert, it takes a body guy to look at it to tell you what the original color was.
Yeah.
He goes inside and scrapes it, you see it done.
Yeah.
You know, that's simple compared to the rest of the order.
Well,
What's it
and-
gonna cost to try to put this thing somewhere, or to put it in here? What's the cost gonna be to our ratepayers, and is it worthwhile?
Right.
And that's what you'll need to find out.
Okay.
And most importantly, as we tell us from now on, is what's our ROI?
What's our what?
ROI, return on investment, to our ratepayers.
Vice President Martin, if I may, I would suggest, it sounds like we have some homework to do. I would suggest it goes back through the committee. We'll get the research, go back through committee before it comes back to the board.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
And I'll organize the committee. I'll meet him in Italy.
Thanks, Chris. All right. Moving along, action item, we're gonna have a speaker, so, if, Glenn, you'd give us the, scoop on the adoption of the resolution approving EWA's fiscal year operating capital budget.
Okay. Well, good evening. So the item before the board tonight is consideration of approval of a resolution that would approve the Encina Wastewater Authority fiscal year 18-19 budget. So as the board knows, Vallecitos is a member agency of the Encina Wastewater Authority. EWA was formed back in 1961 as a joint powers authority. Originally, it was just the cities of Carlsbad and Vista, but 4 other agencies, including Vallecitos, joined in the intervening years. They have a governing document called the Basic Agreement, and it's been revised over time. It's now called the Revised Basic Agreement. But what that document basically does is it provides for the acquisition, construction, ownership, operation, and maintenance of the Encina joint sewer system. And the Basic Agreement requires unanimous approval by the EWA member agencies of the budget. The EWA board and the EWA Joint Advisory Committee considered the budget on April 25th of this year, and they did recommend approval of the operating and capital budgets. And what that does is send it back to the 6 member agencies for their unanimous approval before it comes back to the EWA board on June 27th of this year. If the EWA board does not get unanimous approval of the budget, they are held with the current budget. So whatever the current fiscal year budget is, they get that same amount for both capital and operating in the subsequent year. So the total Encina Wastewater Authority budget proposed, this is a table that shows the first or second column is the fiscal year 17 actuals, and then the current year budget, and then the proposed budget for fiscal year 2019 for both the operating and capital programs. So I'll direct your attention to the column for the 2019 proposed budget. You can see the combined total is about $38 million, which is comprised of almost $16 million in operating program budget and about $22 million in capital programs. The operating program is about 4.5% higher than it was in the current budget year. The capital program is considerably larger. It's about 48.6% higher. So for a net total increase of about 26% above the current year budget. So this is the total EWA budget. As I mentioned, Vallecitos is only one member agency, so the next slide shows the Vallecitos share of the EWA budget. And again, I'll direct your attention to the column fiscal year 19. EWA's share of the total budget is about $7.6 million, made up of about $2.8 million in operating program costs and $4.8 million in capital costs. Of note, on the operating program is Vallecitos' costs actually went down compared to the current year. And that's because we're diverting a lot more of our flows to our Meadowlark facility. So EWA is treating less of our wastewater, and we're treating more at Meadowlark, as well as some of the other operational improvements that have been put in place. You'll recall from the previous slide that overall, the operating program went up 4.5%. Our costs went down 3.2%. Our capital program costs for Vallecitos are about the same as overall, it's a little over 48%. So for a net increase of 24% for the proposed budget compared to the current year's budget. And the big reason for the large capital improvements is because EWA has to get in the business of more solids handling capacity. So they plan to do some improvements to their digesters, which take a lot of the material removed from the wastewater stream and convert that into gas and the biosolids pellets. And they are looking into getting what's called a rotary drum thickener, which helps condense the material and make their process more efficient. So those two things and eventually getting another heat dryer in there are driving up their capital costs pretty significantly. But notice the comment at the bottom, the proposed fiscal year 2019 budget for EWA has been incorporated into the budget that you'll see in the item right after this one. So the budget that we're asking the board to approve for Vallecitos tonight does include this $7.6 million for EWA. It's already built in. So the recommendation is to adopt resolution number 1538, approving the Encino Wastewater Authority fiscal year 2019 operating and capital budgets. And if the board were to do that, I would then transmit the approved resolution to Encino Wastewater Authority for their consideration at the June 27th meeting. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I don't have any at this time. Director Evans?
My question is actually for Director Ellenberg, and I wonder if you'd like to, as our rep, give us any
Sure.
comments or
Yeah, I'll
considerations.
chime in. The EWA budget process was actually very thoroughly vetted through the committees. I think both the Policy and Finance and Capital Committees of EWA, and then ultimately to the board, where it was approved unanimously. I fully support the budget as presented.
Just a question more out of curiosity. In years past, EWA's general manager or their finance manager would come and give us a presentation about the budget. Is there a reason why they didn't do it this year?
I just didn't reach out to them this year. They would have been happy to do so, but we didn't connect with them on this one.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to move for approval.
We have a speaker.
Oh, sorry.
Mike Hunsaker? The floor is yours for 3 minutes.
I won't be that long. Mike Hunsaker, most of my questions have been answered, but one question I have is that we have a lot more solids being delivered to EWA for brewing, which requires a little different digestion process. And I was wondering if the mounting amount of brewing waste is contributing to the solids issue, and how is it complicated in being met? Thank you.
Thank you.
So Encino Wastewater Authority staff is certainly aware of the prevalence and the increasing number of breweries in the area, so they're concerned about it, but the part of what they're building is to incorporate and be able to address the increase in not just breweries, but other high solids businesses in the area. So it's all factored into the numbers that he was put together.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion.
I move for approval.
Motion made.
Second.
Seconded. Roll call or Roll call vote, please.
Okay, and this is resolution 1538, Director Eleanor,
Yes.
Director Evans?
Yes.
Director Martin?
Yes.
Director Snow?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now stay right there, huh?
No.
Number 2.3, Vallecitos Water District recommended FYI 218 to 219 budget.
Okay, I'm just going to turn it over to Finance Manager Owen.
Oh, is he here?
Hiding in the front row.
Oh, with his faithful companion, Butch. I can't read it.
You can't read it? I'll show it to you afterwards. Okay, what do we have, a clicker?
It's right here.
Good evening, Vice President Martin, members of the board. It is my pleasure, actually our pleasure, to present the fiscal year 2018-2019 recommended budget. So the agenda for tonight is going to be a very similar presentation to what you saw at the board workshop. I have added some of your recommendations into it, so at the end we'll see some changes, but overall it's pretty much the same thing, so sorry about the replay. So the agenda for tonight, we're going to go over the budget process and calendar, talk about where we've been, where we're going. Then I'll talk about the operating expenses for water and wastewater, talk a little about salaries and benefits. Mike will present the water sales purchases and sewer revenue. Now I'll talk about the capital budget, the reserve balances, and finally staff's recommendation. This slide is our budget process timeline. On the left-hand side, it shows our internal process, what staff goes through. On the right, it shows the public meetings and workshops that we've had. So we start planning for the budget in December. In January, the calendar's sent out. And in February, staff actually submits their budget request to the supervisors and managers. And we start, we enter the audit actuals for previous year and start doing the projection for 2018. On February 26th, the Finance Committee met and talked about the budget process and reviewed budgets to actuals from previous years. In March, the staff compiled the operating budget. We completed our year-end projections for 2018, and we started the payroll estimates. The Finance Committee met on March 22nd and reviewed the operating budget requests and went over their preliminary salary and benefit estimates. In April, staff incorporated the budget request into the budget, and we prepared the draft capital budget. And then the draft capital budget and operating budget were reviewed by the finance manager. April 2nd, the Finance Committee met and reviewed the operating budget and the preliminary capital budget. They met again on April 25th and went over the draft operating capital budget and talked about any changes that were made from the previous meeting. In May, we reviewed the draft budget and revised and refined it. And May 21st, we had the budget workshop to go over the proposed budget. Now in June, we've incorporated the requests and changes from the budget workshop, and we revised and refined it, hopefully to perfection. And now June 6th, we are discussing approving the recommended budget, and then that'll be the finish line. So this slide is page 2 of your budget. This shows the total operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2019. So the top portion is actually the capital, debt service, and easement equipment. That's the portion that's funded by reserves or the capital budget. The bottom portion of the wastewater, water operations, and the water purchases are the operating portion of the budget. First, I'm going to talk about the water operating expenses, the $11.7 million. The total water operating budget is actually made up of that plus the water purchases of 32.3, but Mike's going to present that later, so I'll focus on the 11.7. So here's the total water operating expense budget. This is actually on page, looks like 10 of your budget. And you can see the 32.3 is water purchases, which makes up 73% of it. The 11.7 is the remainder. This next slide is actually a summary of page 11 of your budget. The details by department can be found on pages 12 through 14, and further details can be found in your materials and services packet that was given to you at the budget workshop. The biggest variances here are changes from budget year to budget year, the revenues and the water purchases, but Mike will actually talk about those afterwards. So I'm going to look at the other two, which are the operating expenses. So those increased by $200,000, mainly as a result of an increase in pumping charges or power costs. and that actually increased by 161,000 of the 200,000. And G&A increased by $200,000 as a result of less time being charged to projects. So back to the home page, and then next I'll talk about the wastewater operating expenses of $13.1 million, which is 16% of the total budget for the year. This slide shows a breakout of the wastewater operating expenses, and as you can see, 47% of that is our treatment costs of $6.2 million. 3.2 are the operations and maintenance costs, 2.3 are collection and conveyance, and 1.5 are G&A costs. So this slide is a summary of page 21 of your budget. The details by department can be found on pages 22 through 24. And notable changes here are the treatment actually decreased by $200,000, and that's as a result of Encina's budget decreasing by $93,000, and decrease in outside services in both the plant and the lift station. Next, I'll talk a little bit about salaries and benefits. So during 2018, we had 4 retirements, we had 4 vacated positions, we had 2 people on leave without pay, and 2 people on reduced work schedules. Even in filling and budgeting for those positions in the 2019 year, budgeting for an AGM for half the year, and normal steps and increases, plus the COLA at 3.5%, we're still only showing a modest increase in the budget change of $40,000. And total salaries and benefits is actually budgeted to decrease by $20,000. So this slide is a little bit busy, very colorful, but what this shows is the budget to actual salaries and benefits over the last 5 years. The bottom portion is the salaries, the top portion is are the benefits. And the purpose of this is to show that through effective management and efficient operations and scrutinizing every position as they become available, we've been able to keep salaries and benefits steady over the last 5 years, and actually even realize a savings of budget to actual. And salaries have been steady budgeted at $9.7 million over the last 3 years, and benefits have been steady budgeted at $5.8 million over the last 3 years. So next, Mike will actually talk about the water purchases.
Actually, I'll just use the enter key. Thank you, Finance Manager Owen. Vice President Martin, members of the board. It's my pleasure tonight to present some of the numbers behind the numbers. What we have for water purchases, we have about $32.25 million in purchases from the Water Authority. It's made up of about $26.5 million in commodity costs, which is our variable costs, and about $5.75 million in our fixed costs. We are projected to purchase about 16,700 acre feet, which is about 3.4% increase over our current fiscal year 17-18. What we did this year is we did a little bit of sensitivity analysis to let the board understand what would happen if we were to cut back on purchases, if a drought was called and we had to cut back 10%, or if we sold 5% more. So last time I opened up my spreadsheet, did all the fancy dancy stuff. I don't have my spreadsheet today, so I kind of feel kind of naked. But what I did is did some graphs for you. This is the budget that we just talked about in water purchases. It's about $32.25 million. That is the orange bar. In our sales, this is just commodity. It's about $31.8 million. And what I did then is if we were to see a 10% cutback in demand, what would that mean to our budget and our overall bottom line? Sorry. So if there was a 10% cutback in demand, our water revenue, which was $31.8 million projected, would go down to about $27.9 million. And that is a decrease of about of about $3.9 million. So our revenues would take a hit of about $3.9 million. There would be a corresponding offset into our expenditures, but that would only be about $2.1 million. So the net effect, if we were to have to cut back and the demand were to cut back about 10%, we would see about a $1.8 million hit to our net operating income. And right now, I believe we have budgeted about $2.1 million going into our replacement reserve, somewhere around there. So even with a 10% cutback, we'd still be within reason on that. Then I also wanted to kind of show you, well, what would happen if we sold 5% more than what we're projecting. So with that, so the green bar then is our revenue. So we would go from the $31.8 million to about $33.9 million. So that number is an increase of about $2.1 million. Our expenditures would go up from the 32.25 to about 33.5 almost. So that'd be an increase of 1.2 million in our expenditures. So if we were to sell 5% more than what we're projecting, we would actually see a positive, a net difference of about $925,000 going into our operating reserves. So I kind of wanted to give you that so you can kind of see kind of bookends of where we think we could be. You know, we're never going to be right on budget. So the chances of being about 10% to 5% over will fall hopefully somewhere in there unless something drastic happens. And then I just wanted to go over a little bit with the sewer revenues. Sewer revenues, the rates have not changed from the previous year. So the revenues are pretty much flat. They are going to grow about 0.3% for growth. So the revenues for sewer would be about $17.9 million. And I believe that is the end of my presentations on the revenues and expenditures. Unless you had any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank
Okay,
you,
I'll
Mike.
turn it back to Finance Manager Owen. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, just in case you thought I forgot the budget party page, I didn't. I just saved it for the intermission there. So, welcome back. Might be the last time you see it.
Yeah.
Probably change next year.
It's the third time.
It's at least the third time. It's like the sixth
Yeah,
time.
maybe the sixth time.
I got my use out of it, right?
Yep.
Okay, so next I'm going to talk about the $17.1 million for the capital budget, and that's just the portion of the capital projects for fiscal year 2019. The total five-year capital budget is actually $144 million. So in looking at the $144 million compared to last year's five-year capital budget, this year's is made up of carryover projects of $77 million, new CIP requests of $43.9, and future CIP requests of $22.9, for the total of $143.9, and that's on page 34 of your budget. Then you have vehicles and easements of $778,000. That's on page 96 of your budget, the details to that. The total increase from last year to this year is $22.3 million. And that is made up mostly of carryover projects. They increased by $13 million. And carryover projects are just projects that were budgeted last year that weren't completed and carried over to this year. And new CIP requests of $9.3 million, an increase. This slide shows the CIP costs over the next 5 years broken out by water and sewer. And you can see in 18-19, the $17.1 million is made up of $13.5 million in sewer capital projects and $3.6 million in water capital projects. The total water capital projects over the next 5 years are 45.1 and sewer 98.8. Of that $98.8 million in sewer projects, this slide actually shows the breakout between VWD and Encina. And of the 98.8, $23.6 million are Encina capital projects. You can see it's about $5 million per year for the next 5 years for Encina capital projects. This slide is a lot of numbers, kind of hard to see, but believe it or not, it's actually a summary of page 34 of your budget. And you can see here the carryover projects total 77.2, and the new projects total 66 million. Of that, 22.9 of the future projects that are included in there. The majority of the new projects are actually the Encina Parallel Land Outfall at 13.7 million, and the Encina Wastewater Authority at 23.6. This slide is the capital budget timeline over the next 5 years, so it breaks out the cost of each project over the next 5 years. And we can see the 17.1 million at the bottom there. Of that, 4.8 are Encina capital projects, and 2.8 are for the Rock Springs sewer replacement. Also notable are that in 2021, we're budgeted to begin construction on the parallel land outfall. That's going to be $6 million. Around that time, we may have to look at issuing debt, but that's in a few years, so we'll worry about that then. It's not part of what you're approving tonight for this budget. Next, I'm showing the reserve balances. This shows the previous 5 years and the projected 17, 18, and 19 budgeted reserve balances. Reserves have been steadily increasing, and for 18, 19, water reserves are actually going to increase by $1.1 million, and sewer reserves will decrease by $4.5 million, mainly as a result of Encina projects and the Rock Springs sewer. And this slide is actually a request for trending reserves by Director Lelitharp. So I wanted to show the reserve balances with the floor and the ceiling. The reserve floor is made up of 3 years of replacement capital projects projected and 180 days of budgeted operating expenses. for both water and sewer, so it's a combination of those two. The ceiling is made up of 8 years of projected replacement capital projects for sewer and 10 years of projected replacement capital projects for water, plus the 180 days of budgeted operating expenses for both water and sewer. So as you can see, we've been within our floor and ceiling consistently, and although we're decreasing a little bit in 18-19, we're still at a healthy reserve level. Next, we actually had a request by Director Evans for days in cash, and we did show this slide at the budget workshop. This shows the days in cash. They're budgeted for 410 days for 18-19, and while this is well below the $547 median rating by Fitch for AA, we discussed that that's actually looked at in combination with several other factors such as debt service coverage, reserve levels. They look at management. They look at your debt profile, your operating profile. There's a lot of other factors that are in there. So at 410 days, we think we'll be okay. And then Director Snell had actually requested or asked what our rating was in 2009, and we were well below the Fitch rating for median AA rating. I looked it up. I found our press release, and we actually had a AA rating in 2009. We've actually had a AA rating since 2005, but in 2009 it was AA. And some of the notes on the press release were that we had strong financial performance, rate flexibility, and a manageable capital plan. So we've maintained that capital, we maintained that AA rating until 2013 when we were upgraded to a AA plus rating. And looking at that press release, they noted that we're in a drought recovery and that we had higher debt service coverage ratios, that our capacity fees were recovering, that we had higher days in cash, that we had no debt issuance planned, we were diversifying our sources of water because we were purchasing it from OMWD and we're getting desal, and that we had disciplined rate setting and affordable rates. So that was the reason for our upgrade. We've maintained that rating since 2013, and staff believes with our current rates and revenues that we can maintain that rate going forward. That being said, staff recommends that we adopt the recommended budget for 2018-2019. There's the finish line.
Are you falling down there, or?
That's good. And just short of the finish line, too. So.
Just short, just a little short. Questions?
Not a question, just, we've all gone through this process now for, I don't know, 6, 8 weeks, whatever it's been, and seen different variations of this presentation a handful of times. I just wanted to first thank staff for going through this process. I know it's time-consuming but necessary. And I just want to say a couple of, point out, re-point out, I guess, a couple of items. And one of the things, water purchases they are what they are, right? That's what we wholesale the water and then we resell it. So that I'm not too concerned about. But what I'm really happy and impressed with is the salary and benefits piece of this, because that's also a large component of our budget, one of the largest after water sales. And for that to actually overall go down by 20,000 year over year, when you're looking at employees with raises who get raises every year, as they should, because they do a good job. And for us to be able to manage those costs and have them actually go down, that's very difficult to do. So kudos to staff and everybody that was part of that. And then the other thing is, looking at the capital improvement part of the budget, I've come over the last 4 or 5 years since I've been out here on the board to really appreciate and understand how important it is to invest in our infrastructure. So I'm glad that with those numbers are, I know that they kind of go down a little bit at first, but then they go back up again. And so I'm glad that we're making the appropriate investments. So thank you so much. It looks like a great budget.
Thank you.
George Lotharp?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd like to commend staff for another excellent budget process, and I would move staff's recommendation.
I would second the recommendation, and I'd also just like to say, thank you for the long process, for all the details, for a very nice way of compiling here at the end for a brief one. And not just thanks to management and staff in the budget process, but down to each one of our employees who I feel has really supported this district in many ways and the efforts they've taken. I agree with Director Sinella that our capital improvement and investments are critical, and I commend the decision-making process in deciding what and when and being able to defer and then move forward proactively. So I am honored to be this side of the dais for such a commendable group of individuals, down to last one. It's very impressive in the process, and I thank the Finance Committee for the time they put in and great questions they asked. So, thank you all.
And lastly, as a Finance Committee Chair, I really want to thank all staff that was involved. You gave us more answers than we had questions to, and I will tell you, it's the first time I've seen that in the 6 years I've been here, and made this a very interesting, understandable transition to go from A to Z and have all the answers as you went. So you made life a lot easier. I thank all staff and our new general manager, our new finance manager. Fantastic job.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll take a vote. Is it just a motion? Motion made and second. All in favor? Aye. No abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you. Great job.
Thanks, Wes.
What's the name?
Chucky. Actually, Ed named it. I can't take credit for it. I just labeled it.
All right. But, I mean, the length of time, we've been on this since January, and it really, really formed out so well. So anyhow. Okay, reports, general manager report.
All right, 6 items to report on today. I'll try to make them quick.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so just real quick. So the last 2 days, we've done some public outreach. As the board knows, they approved a contract to do some water main rehabilitation on Stargaze Court and River Run Circle. So on Monday, we did a kind of a open house, I'll call it, where we went out on Stargaze, and yesterday was at River Run. And basically, we just set up a booth out there and tried to explain to any interested customers what was coming their way. It was really well received. I think the customers really appreciated us taking that extra effort. Staff did an awesome job. James gave the presentation on Monday, and Jason Hubbard gave the presentation yesterday. So I think that's something we need to do more of, to recognize that the projects that we do impacts our citizenry and to keep them informed. So, and I know some of you were at those meetings, and I appreciate the support at the board level.
Yeah, if I can just add something to that, the one at River Run yesterday, we had maybe 12 people there, and 3 of them spoke how great that when we've been out there repairing things, how accessible our employees were, how nice they were, how they went out of the way to help the folks.
Yeah.
So it was very enjoyable to hear that. Again, as we have been, our staff out there is doing a great PR job by just being human beings out there.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I hear those comments all the time, those compliments. It's
Yeah.
great to hear from our operations staff.
If I can just pile on, I attended with Director Martin earlier in the week, the one that was in San Leo Hills, and we also heard similar feedback from some of the residents that our crews, when they are out there, when there is a leak or something going on, that they go out of their way to inform the customers, talk to the customers, keep them abreast of what they're doing and how long it's going to take, and they really appreciated that. So that's great to hear that feedback.
Great, thank you. So that project will actually start next week, I believe, and should be, the two streets start next week and should be completed by mid to latter part of July. So that's moving forward. The boardroom audiovisual upgrade project, the contract has been awarded, a pre-construction meeting is set up, and construction schedule is being prepared, so that'll start pretty soon. There's the potential that it may impact the board meetings. We'll try not to do that, but there may be a chance that we'd have to have a meeting in the training room or have to work under construction sites. So we'll see. Golden Door lawsuit, just to bring the board up to speed on this. The district was sued by the Golden Door a while ago for its water supply assessment for the Newland Sierra project. That went to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals denied their claim, and they claiming that the proper venue for the lawsuit was actually the CEQA process. And their ability to appeal to the state Supreme Court has lapsed, so that it is now dead. They have no claim against the district anymore. The Planning Commission of the county will hear the environmental impact report for the Newland Sierra project on June 28th and 29th. And assuming they approve, the Planning Commission approves it, the Board of Supervisors will consider the certification of the EIR for the project in September. And And that's what the Court of Appeals said, that's the proper venue for that. So I know water supply issues will be raised in the CEQA process again, but the lawsuit with the Golden Door is dead. And all the district legal costs have been reimbursed by Newland Sierra, so we're not out a single nickel defending that lawsuit, so that's great. Another legal case, Diamond Environmental Services, they were indicted by the Environmental Protection Agency for illegal discharge of sewage they collected into municipal sewer facilities. They had a sentencing trial on May 18th, which was continued to May 23rd. The company and 3 of its top officers were all found guilty. The CEO is going to be serving 5 months in federal prison, 3 years probation, and hit with a $15,000 fine. The chief operating officer got 5 years probation, 250 hours of community service. The company is on 5 years probation, and collectively they are hit with a fine of $2.64 million, restitution to 5 agencies, including Vallecitos, in the amount of $2.25 million, and they had to forfeit illegal profits to the tune of $2.2 million. So that totals just slightly over $7 million. We're working with the court right now to figure out what Vallecitos' share of that $2.25 million is. We don't know at this point in time, but in conversations with the Encino Wastewater Authority, who was named as the damaged party, all those monies that go to EWA will come to Vallecitos because we paid through higher rates. So that's it on that item. Mr. Hunsaker mentioned Assembly Bill 1668. Just want to give a brief update. The governor actually signed AB 1668 and Senate Bill 606. Those imposed new or expanded requirements on California water agencies and suppliers. It's primarily related to water use efficiency. It requires the State Water Resources Control Board to work with the Department of Water Resources to establish long-term urban water use efficiency standards by June 30th, 2022. So it's still a few years away. And there will be components for indoor residential use, outdoor residential use, water loss, and other categories. The indoor use, as Mr. Hunsaker mentioned, is going to start at 55 gallons per person per day through from when it institutes through January 1st of 2025. After January 1st of 2025, it actually decreases, heading towards 50 gallons per capita per day. For the outdoor water use standards, they don't have numbers determined yet, but they've established a process, and the Department of Water Resources has to conduct studies of landscape and climate throughout the state by 2021 to help develop the standards. And those results will then be shared with the State Water Resources Control Board and the water agencies that supply water to customers for the development of water use objectives. So there's going to be a lot of work that still needs to be done on both those, the Assembly bill and the Senate bill. There is I'm sorry.
Are you moving on to another item?
No, I've got 3 more bullets on that one, but
Oh,
if you
okay,
have
go ahead. When you're done, I'd like to.
So there is a requirement on the water agencies such as Vallecitos to do annual reporting. So we have to report out on how we're doing to meet those numbers that are prepared. We will have to do 5-year drought risk assessments, and water shortage contingency plans must be incorporated into our urban water management plans. And lastly, starting in 2027, any suppliers such as Vallecitos who violate the standards are subject to fines of up to $1,000 per day during non-drought years and up to $10,000 per day during declared drought emergency conditions. And that's all I had on that item.
You may not know this, but how are they going to know how many people live in a house or an apartment? And then also, how are they going to Mr. Hunsaker's point, how are they going to address the all of the units throughout the state? Because Northern California is probably even more. There's even single-family homes that don't have meters, right? So how are they going to address all that? And the homes that are on a shared meter?
Yeah, those are certainly some of the concerns that the water suppliers have brought up. Just the ability to track this and monitor it is virtually impossible. And the amount of bureaucracy it may require to track that is unknown at this point in time. So I think there's still some work in this process. The big picture issues seem to have been settled, like the gallons per capita per day, but how do you measure it? How do you know what kind of verification process, how many people live in the property? If you have large animals, is there an allocation for a horse or a pig or whatever you have? Those are big questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, because there's also some residential that have a small little, build a avocado trees, right? So how do they kind of fit in if you have, 3 people living in a house and you have, 25 avocado trees in the backyard
Yeah.
because you live in kind of more of a rural environment?
So that's part of that process that the State Water Resources Control Board and the Department of Water Resources still need to tackle, the outdoor portion of that. So part of what they're talking about is relying on aerial imagery, looking at what type of vegetation every property in the state has, and determining what an appropriate water consumption is for the type of coverage. But if you're trying to tell me from an aerial view, you'll know what kind of vegetation, what the water requirements are based on the topography and the climatology. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's going to be very problematic.
Hearing.
It sounds a lot like a paper tiger on a governor's way out. Because the truth is, you can't ask somebody how many people live in their apartment. You can't knock on the door and say how many people live here. That's illegal.
Yeah.
So-
So my guess is
There's no way of knowing.
what's going to happen is the state's going to establish standards at the highest level and leave it up to the local agencies to do the implementation. So for example, if you say there's 103,000 people in your service area, they're going to multiply that by 55 gallons per day, and that's going to be how much in aggregate for indoor water use, regardless of how many people live in each particular dwelling. So they're not going to probably fine an individual property owner, but if we, in aggregate, go over that 55 gallons per day, they're going to fine the agency, and then we have to try to figure out who's the violators are. But those are issues that still need to be worked
Well,
out.
yeah, one of the challenges with that then is if you have company come in, they can't use any water because they're not listed.
Yeah, that's
Or
right.
you have a big family and they leave, you can have more, but the way they're trying to do this, and then you would have people do this with hotels and everything, as well as like you were talking about, how much water does a big dog allow versus a little tiny dog? And the same thing when a pig has piglets, do you call them up and say, I've got 10 little piggies that I plan to keep them for a year? It's very, very interesting. And they've already done some demonstrations on trying to guess the land for water outside use. And they said they've gone with the drones and stuff. They cannot determine if it's under or not. And then we're arguing about, is it land that's actually being used, or is it land that could be used? So there's big differences when you come to that, because, if it's land that's used, you better go out and plant something real fast when they fly over, so you get credit. It's just ridiculous, but I'm hoping you're
There's no way
right.
to enforce it, absolutely no way.
I'm hoping, it'll be a while. That's why they say so far away, but.
So the last item I had is the San Marcos Chamber, City of San Marcos Chamber of Commerce has scheduled its 4th annual Meet the Elected Officials event. Just to give you a heads up, it's an opportunity for business owners and customers to come out and meet their elected officials. So there'll be members of federal, state, and local elected officials will be on hand. The event will be held at the San Marcos Community Center at 1 Civic Center Drive. It'll be on Thursday, July 26th. Of 2018 from 5:30 to 7:30, and the chamber is looking for RSVPs, so anybody who's interested in attending should contact the chamber. So that's all I had for my report.
Do we need to agendize that?
Well, it's something we can bring forward to talk about, if you're talking like for per diem, things like that. I'll look and see if it's an already approved event. If it's not, I'll bring something forward for the board's consideration.
It is approved.
I will verify to see if it is. If it is not, I'll bring an item forward for the board's consideration. That's all I have.
Thank you. District Legal Counsel.
I would just comment that GM Pruitt got my cliff notes here. He covered everything very well on 1668 and 606. So I'll just forecast. I think he's right in that the state is not going to do the enforcement of this regulation. They're going to push it to the local level, which will require budget-based approaches where agencies are going to have to go out and look at individual properties, set water budgets, et cetera. I mean, a lot of agencies do it, but that's what I think will happen relative to that. But there's a lot to be seen how they're going to implement this. They've obviously set the high-level watermark on some of it. They're going to look to the locals to implement it and enforce it.
That it, sir?
That's everything. Thank you.
San Diego County Water Authority.
Well, I'll start with a fun thing, and that was last week they had awards given out to Del Mar Fair before it opened, and I was representative for the Water Authority, and we gave out this award and $1,000 to the exhibit in the garden section that portrayed waterways usage best. And it was all of them were excellent, but this one did an outstanding job of promoting not just how beautiful the plants were, but the irrigation. If you get a chance to go, you might step out to see. It was really very nice, and that was fun to do something. Because Thursday's meeting was a long, long meeting. It went until 7 o'clock Thursday night. And it was a lot of closed sessions, but I'm gonna need your help on this, Glenn. We passed the resolution for a public hearing in June for the rate increase, but after going through all my numbers, I didn't bring my papers with me. I don't remember what we were planning. It's not a very big rate increase. Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it's about 1%. Wes, do you remember the number? Wes or Mike?
What they're anticipating our rating? I was saying I should know that by heart, but it just, my head is,
Yeah, it's under 2%.
I think it was 1.9% is, yeah.
yeah. And they were, went ahead and did take some of the funds out of reserves to keep that down, so that was really exciting. And then I just wanted to point one of the things out, that we did have a long discussion. You probably all heard the little rumors about things are going on, and there's been a claim made at the Water Authority for some type of harassment. And the board at this time, we have an investigation going on. I just want you to know, until facts are gathered, we don't have any conclusions. But if you've seen something in the paper, or you've heard many rumors flying, the facts have yet to be gathered. Now, how long it will take to gather the facts, I don't know. It's a process. But he did want, and that was a lot, that and the litigation and how to move forward in coming to some resolution. So very interesting time there, a lot of change. I think that was the gist of what was really important.
Thank you. Encino Wastewater Authority.
Yeah, Policy and Finance Committee will meet next week, June 12th, and that's all I have.
Okay. Standing Committee, report on the Finance Committee. You saw the culmination of what we did tonight when we adopted the budget. And again, to all those people that were involved, thank you very much. From myself and Mike, you have anything to say?
No, I said it earlier, thank you.
Okay. Director's report on travel, conferences, seminars. Does anybody have anything?
The only thing that I recall attending recently, I think since the last meeting, was the CSDA dinner meeting, and the primary speaker that evening was San Diego District Attorney Summer Steffen, and she was just giving us a presentation and an update of kind of the criminal justice system and crime in general in San Diego County, and I'm also happy to report that she overwhelmingly won re-election last night too.
Well, last night.
So it was good, kind of different, you don't typically hear district attorneys speak at, a special counsel's, or a special district's
Yeah.
type meeting, so.
Okay. Someone else? Okay.
Oh, I would like to
Yes, I'm
report, I
sorry.
was also at the same dinner, and she did do a great presentation, and that was also when we gave out all the awards for the students who are, there's elementary and middle school and high school. What they presented were the video program of the winners for what makes a special district special. And this is now what, the 4th or 5th year they've done it, and each year it's gotten better and better and better. And then for a while they were talking about not doing it. They got a great turnout and some really cute videos. And I don't know if we can get any of those and put them on our website. I could ask Chris if it's possible. They were interesting to see these students do their work. And that was, I think that's all I've been to.
Okay, the CASA Annual Conference is coming up, and the Urban Water Institute Conference is coming up as well, under other business. Director's comments, I have one. Director Sinella, who was part of the committee for the Boys and Girls Club auction this year, which was a Walt Disney theme. We received a plaque and a thank you from them for our contribution. I'll pass that down, and we can give it to Glenn to put on our wall of fame in the back there. You can dust off some of those hysterical ones and put that, historical ones.
Yeah, and you might notice on the bottom of it, the artwork is actually done by a local student. They did a bunch of these plaques to thank all their different folks who supported the club, and each one of them has a different student who did the artwork, so it's kind of neat coming from one of our local kids.
Do we have any other director's comments or future agenda items?
I just have
Yes.
one quick comment. We were talking about the kudos for staff. I don't know for sure if it was the Vallecitos Water District or not that was doing something out of Discovery Lake recently, but I was at a group last night, and this woman said, oh, they were out there taking pictures and checking things, and I went up and talked to them, and I just wanted you to know that she said, I'm sure it was Vallecitos, because they were so polite and so helpful, and made a couple comments, and I said, you know, there's standing water, and there might be mosquitoes there. And, well, thank you, ma'am, we're gonna look into, what is it, vector control? Is that what the insect is? So, and I said, oh, do you know for sure it was Vallecitos? She said, no, but I've dealt with them before on our street, and they're absolutely wonderful people. So, it's nice to have that reputation
It
out
is.
there. It's really fun.
Do we have, a curious question, do we have shirts for all of our employees?
No, I don't believe so. We have shirts you asked? For the field personnel, we provide uniforms, and some of the outreach folks and some of management, I believe, have shirts, but not for all staff.
What about our engineering staff? Don't we have really nice buttoned-up shirts with their name embroidered on them? We don't have that?
I never got one, if we do, but,
I know Mr. Hernandez wears one that he purchased himself, and it was very sharp.
yeah, well, we've been having conversations recently about providing shirts for the board members in their official capacity and for staff members who make presentations like at the Water Academy and things like that. I think it'd be good to have like a team appearance.
They do that at the Water Authority through, I think it's through United Way. They order all the shirts and they all say,
Oh, really?
yes, so that, you might want to talk to them, or I
Okay.
could,
It
on how
was
they
my
do that.
observation at both workshops we had outdoors, was that they pointed out who the lead was that was gonna be out on site most of the time, and said he'd be in a uniform. Well, they weren't in uniform that night.
Okay.
So, but he said both times, both presentations said, they'll have the Vallecitos uniform. I go, well, I don't think they have them, they have them on now. The only one in uniform, Director Sinella, I believe, and our PR person, what's the,
I had
Elisa?
I got a Vallecitos polo
he had
shirt
one of his
4 years
Vallecitos
ago.
polo shirts on.
I've worn it 4 times, but it comes in
Yeah.
handy every once in a while.
One time a year.
And I wore my name tag, which I found.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, with that, nothing else to be said, meeting is called adjourned. Thank you.